The call for help. In the deep corners of space, where the stars flicker like distant lights, an unknown force was calling out. It wasn't a voice from another world. It was a signal, a desperate plea that echoed across the galaxy. For years, no one had heard anything like it. But now, the message was clear. Someone needed help. The aliens who sent it were on the edge of survival, and they had no one left to turn to. The message reached Earth like a whisper at first. At first, no one noticed. The transmission was weak, filled with static, and hard to decipher. But something in it stood out, a pattern, a structure that couldn't be ignored. It was a signal from a distant planet, far beyond the familiar reaches of human exploration. It wasn't just a regular distress call. This was a cry for survival. The message was brief but urgent. Help us, we are dying. Only you can save us. The message's origin was a mystery. Who were these aliens? Why had they chosen to reach out to Earth? And what did they mean by only you can save us? The questions piled up, but the answers were nowhere to be found. It wasn't enough for Earth's leaders to simply understand the words. They needed to understand the meaning. What was at stake? Inside a secret government facility, scientists and experts worked tirelessly to decode the signal. Days turned into weeks as they studied every part of it. The alien language was unlike anything humans had ever encountered, but slowly the scientists started to piece it together. The message spoke of a planet in crisis, a world in the farthest reaches of space, struggling to survive against forces that seemed almost impossible to fight. The aliens were on the brink of extinction, their resources running dry, their environment dying. They needed help, desperately. It wasn't just a matter of technology or knowledge. These aliens were asking for something more: human intervention. The message wasn't only a call for assistance, it was a plea for survival itself. But why had they come to Earth? Why not any other planet? Why did they think humans could help them? The decision wasn't easy. Earth's leaders had always been cautious about venturing too far into the unknown. Many feared what might happen if they reached out to this unknown species. What if it was a trap? What if these aliens had darker intentions? After all, they were dealing with beings they had never seen, never met, and could barely understand. But the voice of the desperate aliens was too strong to ignore. It was clear that whatever was happening on their planet, it was urgent. They didn't have time to waste. A few voices in the council stood firm, arguing against sending help, but most others were moved by the message. They agreed to respond. But the question remained: who would go? Who would risk everything to travel to an unknown planet, to face a species they knew nothing about? The Earth's government made the only choice they could: the elite soldiers of the Deathworlders. These were the toughest, most experienced warriors in the universe, trained to survive in the most dangerous conditions known to humanity. They were the perfect candidates to face the unknown dangers of another planet. There was only one problem. Even they were unsure of what awaited them. The Deathworlders were the best of the best. They had survived countless battles on planets where every moment was a fight for survival. They had faced enemies of all shapes and sizes, from giant creatures to hostile civilizations. But the unknown of space, the unpredictability of alien worlds, was something they had never fully experienced. What would they face on this strange planet? Could they really help these aliens, or would they be walking into a trap? The questions haunted them, but they had no choice but to answer the call. As the team of Deathworlders gathered to prepare for the journey, a sense of unease settled over them. Each of them had faced their share of danger, but this mission felt different. There was something about the way the aliens had reached out that made them feel uncertain. It wasn't just a plea for help. It was a challenge, one that they had no idea how to face. The ship that would carry them to the alien planet was one of the fastest ever built by human technology. But speed alone couldn't prepare them for the dangers that lay ahead. The journey into the unknown was long, filled with the eerie silence of space. For days, the crew sat in the cold void of space, wondering what they were getting into. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. One of the soldiers, Captain Jordan, stood by the observation window, staring into the black abyss outside. The stars seemed distant and cold, like tiny points of light lost in an endless sea. The silence of space was deafening, but beneath it, there was a hum, a low, vibrating energy that seemed to grow stronger the closer they got to the alien planet. "Captain, we're nearing the coordinates," one of the crew members said, breaking the silence. Jordan didn't answer at first. He was too focused on the distant planet now visible through the window. The planet was covered in dark clouds, with flashes of lightning crackling across the surface. The signs of a dying world were all around them. "Prepare yourselves," he finally said. "We don't know what's waiting for us down there." The ship's engines roared as it entered the atmosphere of the alien world. The Deathworlders were ready for anything. But the questions still lingered. Why did these aliens need their help? What had driven them to such desperation? And what price would they have to pay to save them? The answer to those questions would come soon enough. But as the ship descended toward the surface, one thing was certain: the Deathworlders would face a challenge unlike anything they had ever known. The unknown allies. The journey through space had been long, and now the Deathworlders were finally on the edge of the alien planet. Their ship shook violently as it broke through the thick atmosphere. A sense of unease ran through the crew, but they had trained for this. No matter how strange or dangerous the world before them might be, they were ready to face it. However, as they approached the surface, the questions grew louder in their minds. What kind of creatures had sent the message? Were they friends, or were they merely using the humans as pawns? Captain Jordan stood at the command center, eyes scanning the turbulent sky outside the window. The dark clouds above seemed alive, swirling violently, almost as if the planet itself was warning them to turn back. But they couldn't afford hesitation now. There was a reason they had come, and they couldn't abandon the mission before they even set foot on the planet's surface. "Prepare for landing," Jordan ordered. "And stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into." The rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances, but there was no turning back. They were here to help, or at least, that's what they told themselves. The ship landed with a thud, the ground beneath them unsteady. As the doors of the ship opened, a wave of heat and dust rushed inside. The air was thick with moisture, a stark contrast to the freezing void of space they had just left. The atmosphere, though breathable, was unlike anything the humans had encountered before. It was heavy, thick, and oppressive. Something about the air felt wrong, as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting. Outside the ship, the world stretched out in front of them. An alien landscape, barren yet strangely beautiful. The ground was cracked and scorched, covered in what looked like blackened earth, as though something had set it on fire long ago and never let it fully heal. In the distance, jagged mountains rose like ancient spires, and a dark, polluted river snaked across the land. The skies above were a mixture of swirling purple and gray clouds, lightning crackling across the heavens, casting an eerie glow across the desolate land. "Welcome to the end of the world," Captain Jordan muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. They had arrived at the coordinates sent by the aliens, but there was no sign of them. No welcoming party, no beacon guiding them. Just an empty wasteland. The Deathworlders disembarked cautiously, weapons drawn, their senses alert for any signs of danger. They could hear nothing except the distant rumble of thunder, the air thick with an ominous silence. It didn't take long for them to spot something strange, a set of structures in the distance. They were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Towering spires made of black, glass-like material rose from the ground, jagged and twisted, as if they had been built in a hurry and abandoned long ago. The structures looked ancient, yet disturbingly modern. They appeared as though they were waiting for someone to return, but no one had. Captain Jordan motioned for the team to move forward, their footsteps echoing in the silence as they approached the structures. Every member of the crew felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Who had built this? What were these beings like? Suddenly, A faint hum reached their ears, almost imperceptible at first, but growing louder with every step. It was coming from inside the structures. Someone, or something, was there. The Deathworlders' grip tightened on their weapons as they moved cautiously inside. The interior of the structure was just as strange as the outside. The walls were smooth and curved, illuminated by an eerie, glowing light that seemed to pulse with life. The air was cold, and the sound of the hum filled the silence like a heartbeat. It was clear that whoever had built this place had left in a hurry, but the hum was a sign that something, or someone, was still here. As they moved deeper into the structure, they heard it. A voice, faint but unmistakable. It was speaking in a language the humans couldn't understand. But the tone was clear, desperate, pleading. It was coming from the other side of the room. The Deathworlders reached the source of the voice, and what they found took them by surprise. Before them stood a being, humanoid but unlike anything they had seen before. It was tall, thin, and its skin was a shimmering silver gray. Its eyes were large, dark, and deep-set, glowing with an unnatural light. The alien looked frail, its body almost skeletal, yet there was an air of intelligence in its gaze, something that felt ancient and wise. "Are you?" The ones who answered the call. The alien spoke, its voice soft yet filled with urgency. It was clear that it had been waiting for them. Captain Jordan stepped forward, keeping his voice steady. "We received your message. You asked for help." The alien nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "We are the Vira," it said, using a strange word that the Deathworlders couldn't quite translate. "We are the last of our kind. Our world is dying, and we have no more time. You are our only hope." The crew exchanged looks, trying to process the information. This alien, their supposed ally, was in desperate need, but the tone in its voice sent chills down their spines. Something was off. The urgency was palpable, but there was an undercurrent of fear that no one could ignore. "How can we help?" Captain Jordan asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. The Vira's eyes flickered with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "We need you to fight," it said simply. "There is a force, a great darkness, that is consuming our world. If you don't stop it, we will be no more." The team stood silent, processing the words. They had come here thinking they were answering a simple call for help. But now, they were faced with a problem much bigger than they had imagined. The aliens' desperation was clear. But what was this force they spoke of? Was it truly something they could fight? "You must come with us," the alien insisted, its voice filled with urgency. "Time is running out." Captain Jordan hesitated for a moment before nodding. There was no turning back now. The Deathworlders had come for a reason, and if they wanted to get to the truth, they would have to follow this alien into the heart of its dying world. "Lead the way," he said, his voice steady. As they followed the Vira deeper into the structure, the shadows of the unknown grew longer. The fate of this alien species, and their planet, rested in their hands. And the Deathworlders, though uncertain of what lay ahead, knew one thing for sure. They were about to face a challenge unlike anything they had ever known. Journey into the unknown. The alien led them through the twisting corridors of the darkened structure, each step taking them deeper into the unknown. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, and the silence of the place seemed to press in on them from all sides. Despite their many battles and experiences across the galaxy, nothing had prepared the Deathworlders for this. Every footstep felt like it echoed through a world that had been forgotten by time, a world on the brink of extinction. As they moved deeper into the heart of the alien stronghold, Captain Jordan found himself growing more and more uneasy. The Vira, though seemingly fragile and weak, moved with purpose, its long limbs carrying it swiftly through the corridors. The shimmering light from its eyes illuminated the otherwise pitch-black path ahead, guiding them forward. Yet, despite the alien's calm exterior, there was a nervous energy that radiated from it, a sense of urgency it couldn't be ignored. It wasn't just the planet that was dying. It was the Vira's very existence that was at risk. "How much further?" Captain Jordan asked, his voice steady but filled with suspicion. The longer they walked, the more questions piled up in his mind. What was the true nature of this force they had to fight? And why was the Vira acting like this was their only hope? The Vira's large, glowing eyes shifted, and it paused before answering. "Not much further," it replied, its voice soft, yet tinged with a hint of fear. "The heart of our world is close. You will see it for yourself." As they pressed on, the Deathworlders couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led somewhere important, yet dangerous. The alien species had begged for help, but now that they were on the verge of reaching the heart of their world, things felt off. The atmosphere was growing heavier, the very air around them thick with tension. And still, the Vira remained silent, its pace quickening as they drew nearer to whatever awaited them. Minutes turned into hours as they moved through the vast, labyrinthine hallways. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the silence became. It wasn't the normal, natural quiet of an empty place. It was a silence that felt unnatural, as if the entire world itself was holding its breath. The Deathworlders began to feel like they were intruding on something ancient, something sacred. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the center of the structure. The walls were covered in intricate alien carvings, depicting scenes of long-forgotten battles, of great cities, and of powerful beings rising and falling. The patterns seemed to tell a story of a lost civilization, one that had been destroyed, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. The ground beneath them was covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. In the center of the chamber stood a massive structure, an altar of sorts, surrounded by a pool of dark liquid that shimmered with an eerie, unnatural glow. At the foot of the altar stood another Vira, this one different. Unlike the first alien they had met, this one was tall and regal, its skin glowing with an ethereal light. It stood motionless, staring at the Deathworlders with eyes that seemed to pierce through them, as if it could see into their very souls. "This is the last of our kind," the first Vira whispered. Its voice trembled with reverence as it bowed before the figure. "The Great One." Captain Jordan and his team exchanged confused glances. This alien was different from the rest, more powerful, more ancient, and yet there was something unsettling about it. The Deathworlders had faced countless threats in their time, but nothing like this, nothing that felt so unnatural. The Great One, as the alien was called, finally spoke, its voice deep and resonating. "You have come far," it said, its tone filled with both wisdom and sorrow. "But you do not yet understand the true nature of the danger you face." Captain Jordan stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "We came because you called for help. What is it that we're fighting? What is this darkness you keep speaking of?" The Great One's eyes glowed brighter, and it slowly raised a long, translucent hand toward the pool of dark liquid in the center of the room. "It is not something that can be fought with your weapons," it said. "It is a force older than our civilization. It is a corruption that has spread across the very fabric of our world, poisoning everything it touches." The Deathworlders listened in silence, their hearts heavy with the weight of the alien's words. The Great One spoke of a darkness, a corruption that went beyond physical threats. It was something that had seeped into the land itself, something that couldn't be seen or touched, but was felt in every inch of the planet. "We have tried to fight it," the Great One continued, its voice now a whisper, "but we are too few, and the darkness is too strong. It grows with every passing day, and soon it will consume us all." The room seemed to grow colder as the Great One's words hung in the air. The darkness it spoke of wasn't just a physical enemy, it was something more insidious, a force that could not be seen or fought in the conventional sense. The Deathworlders were warriors, trained for battle, but this was unlike anything they had ever faced. "How can we stop it?" Captain Jordan asked, his voice steady, though his mind raced with questions. If this was something beyond their understanding, how could they possibly defeat it? What had they gotten themselves into? The Great One lowered its hand, the glow from its eyes dimming slightly. "You cannot stop it with violence alone," it said, its voice filled with sadness. "The darkness is not of this world. It is a creation of a being far older and more powerful than anything you can imagine." At these words, the Deathworlders felt a wave of dread wash over them. They had come here to fight, to save a dying world, but now they were being told that the enemy they faced was not something they could defeat with mere strength. This wasn't just about combat. It was about something much deeper, something they had no experience in. The Vira, the once proud race of this planet, had fought and failed. The Great One had led them to this point, and now the humans were their last hope. But what were they truly asking the Deathworlders to do? Was it even possible to defeat an enemy like this? The team stood in silence, each member lost in their own thoughts, processing the gravity of the situation. Captain Jordan finally spoke, his voice calm yet resolute. "We didn't come here to fail. Whatever this is, we'll face it. We'll find a way." The Great One nodded slowly, its eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "I can only show you the path," it said softly. "The rest is up to you." And so, with the fate of the Vira, and perhaps their own world, on the line, the Deathworlders prepared to venture further into the heart of the alien world. They had come to fight, but now they were facing an enemy that could not be fought in the traditional sense. The true challenge lay ahead, and it was unlike anything they had ever known. The planet in crisis. The weight of the Great One's words settled heavily on the shoulders of Captain Jordan and his team. The darkness they were about to face was not like any enemy they had fought before. It was an ancient, intangible force, a corruption of life itself. They had trained for every kind of threat, from the brutal creatures of war-torn planets to the most intelligent and ruthless alien invaders. But this was something different, something far beyond their comprehension. Still, the Deathworlders had no choice but to press on. The Vira had made their desperate plea, and if there was any chance of saving the last remnants of this alien species, they would fight, no matter the cost. Captain Jordan and his team, now standing in the center of the alien stronghold, exchanged uncertain glances before turning to the Vira leader. The Great One had promised to lead them deeper into the heart of the world to show them the full extent of the danger. It was a promise they couldn't ignore. "Lead the way," Captain Jordan ordered, his voice steady, despite the gnawing uncertainty in his gut. The alien nodded, its pale form moving toward a massive door at the far end of the chamber. The door slid open with a low mechanical groan, revealing a vast expanse of broken land beyond, a wasteland that stretched out as far as the eye could see. Where once there might have been lush forests or cities teeming with life, there was nothing but scorched earth, jagged rock formations, and the occasional flash of lightning from a polluted sky. The air was thick with a stifling, almost toxic mist, the scent of decay hanging heavy in the air. "This is where it all started," the Vira leader said, its voice filled with both sorrow and anger. "This was our home, our paradise." The team moved forward, their eyes scanning the horizon. As far as they could see, there was no sign of life, no sign of hope. The very ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble, as if the planet itself was alive and dying all at once. They walked in silence, each Deathworlder lost in their thoughts, trying to wrap their minds around the enormity of the situation. They had expected battle, they had expected danger, but nothing could have prepared them for this. This feeling of a world on the brink of collapse. After what felt like hours of walking through the desolate landscape, the Great One stopped suddenly, its eyes locking onto a spot on the horizon. The team followed its gaze and saw something that made their blood run cold, a towering black spire rising from the ground like a jagged tooth. The spire seemed to pulse with a dark, sickly light, and there was a deep hum emanating from it that vibrated through the ground beneath their boots. "This is it," the Vira said, its voice barely more than a whisper. "The source of the corruption, the heart of the darkness." Captain Jordan's jaw tightened. He could feel it now, the oppressive weight of whatever malevolent force resided within that towering spire. It was as if the very air around them was tainted, as if it were closing in on them, suffocating them with its presence. "What is it?" one of the soldiers, Private Thompson, asked, his voice shaky. He had seen the worst of the galaxy, but this was different. This felt like more than just an enemy. It was something alive. "It is a being," the Great One replied. "An ancient entity from beyond our world. It came to us long ago, disguised as a savior, promising peace, prosperity, but it brought only destruction. The corruption you see around you is its doing. It feeds on the life force of our planet, draining it until nothing is left." The team exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a war against something older than time itself, something that had already destroyed an entire civilization. How could they hope to stop it? "The darkness is not something you can fight with weapons," the Great One continued, its eyes distant. "The only way to defeat it is to destroy the heart, the source of its power. But to reach it, you must pass through the corrupted lands, where the very air is poison, and every step is a battle against the planet itself." Captain Jordan felt the weight of the Great One's words pressing down on him. They had come here expecting a war, a fight they could understand. But this was different. The planet itself was infected, and every step they took would bring them closer to something that could destroy them all. "We'll find a way," Captain Jordan said, his voice firm. "We didn't come this far to turn back." The Great One looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and regret. "I hope you do," it said softly. "For if you fail, it will not just be our world that is lost. It will be yours as well." With that, the team began their trek toward the dark spire. The path was treacherous, every step harder than the last. The air grew thicker with each passing minute, making it harder to breathe. The ground beneath them shifted and cracked, as if the planet itself was trying to stop them from advancing. They reached the spire just as the sun dipped behind the darkened clouds, casting long, foreboding shadows across the land. The spire seemed to reach into the sky, a jagged pillar of black stone, pulsating with an eerie energy. As they approached, the temperature dropped, and the air grew colder, the hairs on the back of their necks standing on end. "This is it," Captain Jordan said, his voice low. "Whatever we face, it's here." The team took their positions, weapons at the ready. But as they stepped closer to the spire, something strange happened. The very ground beneath their feet seemed to shudder, and the air crackled with static. A low, guttural growl emanated from deep within the spire, and the Deathworlders felt the hairs on their necks stand up as a dark shape began to emerge from the shadows. It was a creature unlike anything they had ever seen, a mass of shadow and twisted forms, its eyes glowing with an unnatural, malevolent light. It was not a creature born of flesh and blood, but of pure darkness, a manifestation of the very corruption that had consumed the Viras world. "This is no mere enemy," Captain Jordan muttered, his voice steady despite the growing fear. "This is the corruption itself." The team raised their weapons, but they knew deep down that no matter how strong they were, no matter how skilled, this was going to be the fight of their lives. And as the creature loomed before them, they realized one undeniable truth. The true battle for survival had just begun. The alien civilization. The creature before them loomed like a shadow from another world, its shape ever-changing, its form flickering in and out of focus as if it existed in multiple dimensions at once. The Deathworlders stood their ground, weapons drawn, but there was a chilling realization that swept through them all. They weren't dealing with something they could kill in the traditional sense. This was no mere beast, no alien warrior they could overpower. This was the corruption, the embodiment of a darkness that had spread across an entire world. Captain Jordan's breath came in shallow gasps as he scanned the creature, his eyes narrowed with concentration. His mind raced, searching for any sign of weakness. But there was nothing. The creature was alive with an unnatural energy, its glowing eyes seeming to burn into their very souls. It was the physical manifestation of the force they had been sent to destroy, and it wasn't about to let them take it down without a fight. "We have to stop it before it spreads any further," Captain Jordan muttered under his breath, his voice steady despite the dread building in his chest. "We'll have to use everything we've got." One of the soldiers, Sergeant Phillips, raised his weapon, a high-powered plasma rifle, and fired a shot directly at the creature's center. The beam of energy hit the shadowy form with a burst of light, but the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it absorbed the blast, its form rippling like liquid smoke. It didn't feel pain. It didn't respond to force. It only grew stronger. The Deathworlders looked at one another, their confidence slowly eroding as they realized that no conventional weaponry was going to have any effect on the enemy. It was like fighting the air itself. But there was no time to dwell on their failure. The creature's eyes narrowed, and a low rumble echoed through the air, an ominous sound that vibrated in their bones. "It's adapting," Private Thompson said, her voice tight with fear. "Whatever we do, it learns." Before anyone could respond, the creature lunged forward with lightning speed, extending a mass of shadowy tendrils that shot toward them like vipers. The Deathworlders scrambled to react, diving to the sides as the tendrils slammed into the ground where they had been standing just moments before. The impact sent shockwaves through the earth, and the air grew thick with a palpable sense of dread. "This isn't just corruption," Captain Jordan said, his voice grim. "It's alive. It's conscious." As the tendrils withdrew, the creature shifted again, its form writhing and twisting as if it were trying to find the most effective way to strike. There was no predictable pattern to its movements. Every attack was different, and every defense was useless. The Deathworlders were on the defensive now, fighting not just for their lives, but for the survival of the entire world they had come to save. "Get back to the ship," Captain Jordan ordered, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We need to regroup." But before they could make a retreat, something strange happened. The air around them seemed to thicken further, almost suffocating them as the creature began to speak, not with words, but with a voice that reverberated deep within their minds. "You cannot escape me," the voice whispered, its tone ancient and mocking. "I am the end of your kind, the end of all things. Your world is no different from mine. All will fall." The Deathworlders staggered back, feeling the weight of the creature's presence press down on them. The voice was inescapable, as though the creature had planted itself directly in their consciousness. It was not just a physical threat. It was a psychological one, too. The terror it sowed wasn't just from its power, but from its ability to bend the very fabric of reality around it. "We need to get to the core of this thing," Captain Jordan said, his mind racing. "We have to destroy the heart." But as he spoke, the ground beneath their feet trembled once again, and the creature seemed to draw energy from the very planet itself, growing larger and more powerful. The Deathworlders were running out of options. They needed something more than brute force to stop it. "Captain, look," Private Thompson shouted, pointing toward the spire. As the creature's form continued to shift and grow, something unexpected happened. The heart, the dark spire they had seen earlier, began to pulse, as if reacting to the creature's power. The ground shook violently, and cracks spread out from the base of the spire, releasing a flood of dark energy into the air. It was like the planet was fighting back, but it was too late. The heart had already been consumed by the darkness, and now it was feeding into the creature itself. Captain Jordan felt a cold chill run down his spine as the full scope of the situation hit him. The planet had been so close to death, so close to being entirely consumed by the corruption. But the heart was what had kept it alive, at least in some twisted, agonizing way. And now, that last line of defense was being destroyed. "We can't let it win," Captain Jordan growled, his voice low with determination. "We have to get to the core of this thing. Now." The Vira, who had been standing silently behind them, spoke up, its voice soft but filled with urgency. "The heart is not just a power source. It explained, "It is the center of our world's life force. If you destroy it, you will destroy everything here, including us." The Deathworlders paused, glancing at one another, trying to process the alien's words. They had come to destroy the corruption, but now they were faced with a terrible choice. Do they risk destroying the last hope of the Vera, a species already on the brink of extinction? Or do they fight this unholy creature with the full force of everything they had, knowing that the cost might be the complete annihilation of the alien race? Captain Jordan's jaw tightened as he weighed the decision. There was no easy answer. If the heart was destroyed, there was no coming back for this planet, for these creatures. But if they didn't destroy it, the creature would grow too strong, and it would eventually escape to other worlds, bringing the same darkness wherever it went. "We don't have a choice," Jordan finally said. "We're already too deep into this. We'll find a way to save them. But first, we end this." The Deathworlders readied their weapons, their resolve hardening. This was the moment that would define their mission, and perhaps their entire lives. The corruption had to be stopped, no matter the cost. As the creature's form grew larger, its tendrils reaching out like hungry jaws, the Deathworlders charged forward, knowing this battle would be like no other. The fate of an entire world, and possibly their own, rested on their shoulders. Battle for survival. The Deathworlders stood at the edge of a precipice, both literally and figuratively. The dark spire loomed above them, its pulsating energy seeping into the very atmosphere. The creature, an embodiment of the corruption, was now fully aware of their presence, and its eerie dark tendrils lashed out with terrifying speed, each movement a silent promise of destruction. For a moment, there was no sound except the heavy, ragged breaths of the Deathworlders as they prepared for the battle of their lives. Their weapons hummed with power, ready to unleash destruction upon the creature. But in that moment, even they felt the weight of the challenge before them. This was not the type of fight they had trained for. This was not a war of bullets and blades, but a struggle against something far older, far more dangerous. Something that existed not only in the physical world, but also in the very fabric of life itself. Captain Jordan surveyed the battlefield, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. The creature's movements were unpredictable. It had already demonstrated its ability to absorb and adapt to their attacks. Conventional weapons were useless against it, and the very ground beneath their feet was unstable, shaking with the creature's growing power. The spire at the heart of the battlefield seemed to hum with a dark energy, feeding the creature, and the Deathworlders knew that if they didn't act soon, they would be overwhelmed. "We need to take out the spire," Jordan said, his voice resolute. "It's the source of its power. We destroy it, and we weaken the creature." The team nodded in agreement. They didn't have time to waste. The creature's form was shifting, almost as if it were absorbing the very air, growing stronger with every passing moment. They had to destroy the spire before it consumed everything. But how could they reach it when the creature itself was blocking their path? Sergeant Phillips was the first to break the silence. "We'll need a distraction, something to draw its attention away long enough for a small team to reach the spire." Private Thompson, the youngest of the group, clenched her fists. "I'll take the first hit. Draw it in. Once it's focused on me, you guys make your move." Jordan looked at her, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Thompson, you're not alone in this. We'll go in together." But Thompson shook her head, a fire in her eyes. "Captain, you've seen it. We don't have time for a full-on assault. It's the only way." With a deep, reluctant sigh, Jordan nodded. "Just make sure you come back in one piece." Without another word, Thompson charged forward, her boots slamming against the cracked earth as she sprinted toward the creature. The others followed her movements with a mixture of fear and respect, knowing that this was the first step in their desperate attempt to stop the endless darkness. As Thompson closed the distance, the creature's form twisted, its glowing eyes locking onto her. It hissed, tendrils shooting out toward her with blinding speed. But she was faster. With a quick, calculated roll, she evaded the attack, her rifle blasting a volley of energy at the creature's shifting form. The shots were absorbed into the mass, barely making an impact, but it did what it was meant to do. It got the creature's attention. "Come on, you ugly bastard," Thompson shouted, her voice full of defiance, even as she sprinted to the left to avoid another incoming attack. The creature roared in response, its tendrils slamming into the earth as it moved toward her. Its massive form surged forward, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the ground itself was shaking with its fury. Jordan and the others saw their chance. With the creature's attention diverted, they moved as one. Sergeant Phillips took the lead, charging through the terrain with his plasma rifle raised high. His goal was simple: reach the spire and disable its power source, whatever it was. Behind him, the rest of the team followed with precision, their weapons scanning for any sign of movement, their eyes flicking between the chaos they had left behind and the spire ahead of them. The creature wasn't finished yet. As they advanced, tendrils lashed out from the creature's mass, aiming for Phillips. With a grunt, he ducked, narrowly avoiding the strike, but a second tendril caught him in the shoulder, sending him tumbling to the ground. "Sergeant," Captain Jordan called out, but Phillips managed to steady himself. "I'm fine. Keep going." Phillips gritted his teeth, his hand already reaching for a grenade on his belt. With a quick motion, he tossed the device at the base of the creature's mass. It exploded in a brilliant flash of light, temporarily blinding the creature, but it wasn't enough to stop it for long. "We're close. Move," Jordan barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. The team pushed forward, adrenaline fueling their every step. They could see the spire now, towering over them, its dark energy emanating like a beacon of malevolence. They had only moments before the creature recovered fully, and that would be their last chance. Thompson, still drawing the creature's attention, executed a daring roll to avoid another attack. She grinned, seeing the rest of her team closing in on the spire. "Almost there," she muttered to herself, sweat dripping down her face. Captain Jordan reached the base of the spire first, his eyes scanning the dark structure for any weak points. The energy from the spire pulsed in waves, as if it were alive, reacting to their every movement. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, and the air crackled with an ominous hum. He turned to his team. "Get ready. This is it. Whatever we do next, it's now or never." The team braced themselves, weapons raised and ready. With a series of synchronized movements, they placed charges at the base of the spire, positioning them carefully as they worked in silence. But even as they moved, the creature roared, its massive form surging toward them in a fury. It wasn't going to let them finish the mission so easily. With a defiant shout, Captain Jordan triggered the detonators, and the world seemed to explode in a blinding flash. For a brief, terrifying moment, the universe seemed to slow, the reality of the battle pressing in like the weight of an entire galaxy. The spire groaned, its dark energy swirling into a vortex, and for the first time, the Deathworlders saw the true extent of the corruption that had infected this world. But it was too late to turn back. The explosion rocked the planet, sending shockwaves through the air, and the creature shrieked in agony as the dark power from the spire was ripped away. The darkness began to retreat, its form flickering and destabilizing as the energy that fed it began to dissipate. But it wasn't over yet. The creature was still alive. The battle wasn't won. It had only just begun. Victory or sacrifice. The planet trembled beneath their feet as the explosion from the spire echoed across the land. The air was filled with a deafening roar as the creature howled in pain, its form writhing and twisting in unnatural ways. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though the creature might finally be defeated, its grip on the planet weakening. But the Deathworlders knew better. The battle was far from over. The darkness that had consumed this world for so long wasn't going to disappear just because a spire had fallen. Captain Jordan stood amidst the chaos, his breath ragged as he surveyed the battlefield. The tendrils of the corrupted creature were still reaching out, searching for its enemies, its desperation growing by the second. It was clear now that the creature wasn't just a force of nature. It was a sentient being, driven by an unyielding hunger, a need to consume and destroy. "Keep your focus," Captain Jordan barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "It's not finished. We finish this now, or we risk everything." The Deathworlders regrouped quickly, their weapons raised, eyes scanning the creature's shifting form. The creature's eyes blazed with malevolent energy, its mass twisting and folding, almost as if it were trying to repair itself. The explosion had weakened it, but not destroyed it. It had adapted as it always did. It was learning, evolving, and it wasn't about to let them take the victory without a fight. Sergeant Phillips, despite the deep wound on his shoulder, was back on his feet, his rifle aimed at the creature's heart. "We have to end this. It's feeding off the planet. If we don't stop it now, it'll just regenerate." Private Thompson, still standing in front of the others, her eyes wide with fear, but filled with fierce determination, spoke. "We can't stop it from the outside. It's inside. It's part of the planet itself. If we want to destroy it, we have to get to the core." Again. Captain Jordan's eyes narrowed. The core. He'd heard that before. The Vira had mentioned it. The heart was more than just a spire. It was tied to the very essence of the planet, the source of the corruption. And now, with the explosion, the creature had become something even more dangerous, more powerful. The only way to defeat it was to destroy the heart completely. And that meant going deeper, closer to the very source of the darkness that had plagued this world. "That's suicide," Sergeant Phillips said, his voice dark, yet tinged with the grim understanding of what had to be done. "We can't just walk up to it and blow it up. We'll be crushed under the weight of its power." Captain Jordan stood silently for a moment, his mind working quickly. He knew the odds. He knew that this was no longer a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future. The future of the Vira, the future of their planet, and in some twisted way, the future of humanity. "We don't have a choice," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "We're here to finish this, whatever it takes." The team exchanged glances. There was no turning back now. They had come this far, and they weren't going to stop. But as they moved toward the dark heart of the corrupted world, a heavy weight began to settle on their shoulders. The mission wasn't just about saving a species anymore. It was about survival. They had to destroy the heart or die trying. The ground beneath them shook again, a deep rumble vibrating through the air. The creature's form seemed to pulse with renewed strength, its tendrils lashing toward them, snapping with deadly precision. It was angry now, furious at the intrusion into its domain, and it wasn't going to let them reach the core without a fight. "Move," Captain Jordan ordered, as he sprinted forward, his team right behind him. The air was thick with the stench of corruption, and the ground cracked beneath their feet as they ran, trying to stay ahead of the relentless pursuit of the creature's tendrils. With each step, they drew closer to the heart, but the path was getting more dangerous. The creature was trying to stop them, desperately trying to use every ounce of its strength to keep them from reaching their goal. "Keep moving," Jordan shouted again, his eyes scanning the horizon. They were almost there. The heart of the darkness was just beyond the next rise, a massive blackened monument that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. But then something unexpected happened. The creature's tendrils shot forward again, faster than before. They lashed at Sergeant Phillips, wrapping around him like chains of darkness. He screamed as the tendrils tightened, the force of the creature's grip pulling him off his feet. The Deathworlders stopped, their hearts pounding in their chests, helpless to stop what was happening before them. "Sergeant," Captain Jordan shouted. Phillips struggled against the dark tendrils, his hands gripping the black tendrils that bound him. His eyes met Jordan's, filled with desperation, but also a quiet understanding. The creature wasn't just taking him. It was sacrificing him to stop them. "Get to the heart," Phillips gasped, his voice choked with pain. "You have to stop it. This is my fight now." "No," Jordan roared. We can get you out. We can. It's too late, Phillips said, his voice steady despite the agony. This thing is feeding on me. It won't stop until it's consumed every last one of us. If you want to end it, you have to destroy the heart. Go. Now. With those words, Phillips's face twisted in pain as the creature's tendrils tightened their grip. It was too much. There was nothing more they could do for him. And with a final, heart-wrenching roar, Phillips was pulled into the darkness, swallowed whole by the corruption. The Deathworlders were stunned into silence, the weight of their loss heavy on their shoulders. Phillips had given his life for this mission, and in that moment, they all knew what they had to do. Captain Jordan turned to the team, his eyes blazing with fury and resolve. This ends now. With one final, unified push, they reached the heart. The corruption had become a torrent now, the air thick with the force of its power. The ground beneath them quaked, as though the world itself were protesting the death blow they were about to deliver. They placed the final charges around the base of the heart, each step accompanied by the creature's howls of fury. The tendrils were still reaching, still lashing out in the final moments of its existence, but the Deathworlders were focused. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for a future, one that could exist beyond the grip of the darkness. Captain Jordan gave the order. The explosion was deafening. For a moment, everything went white. The world seemed to collapse in on itself, the earth shattering as the heart was obliterated. The creature let out one final scream, so loud, so intense, that it shook the very foundations of the planet. And then, with a deafening silence, it was over. The planet shook, the darkness receding, the weight of the corruption lifting. The creature, its heart destroyed, faded into nothingness, its hold on the planet broken. The Deathworlders stood in the aftermath, surrounded by the crumbled ruins of the heart. They were battered, bruised, and grieving the loss of their comrades. But they had done it. The creature was gone. The Vira's planet, though scarred, had been saved. But at what cost? Captain Jordan stood there for a long time, staring at the ruins of the heart. Phillips's sacrifice weighed heavily on him. They had won, but they had lost so much along the way. The victory was bittersweet. It wasn't just the creature that had been destroyed. It was a part of them, too. The Deathworlders had saved the Vira, but at the end of this battle, they had all been changed, and the memory of those they had lost would haunt them forever.